Welcome to Today Matters. My name is Heidi Hensley, and I'm the Next Gen pastor here at Skyline. Today, we are in the book of Nehemiah, and we're talking about what to expect when you rebuild. You may be in a season of rebuilding. You may be in a season of rebuilding a marriage, a relationship, or even just healthy rhythms within your life. Whatever it is, there is a ton to learn from the book of Nehemiah. A little bit of context. If you remember the book of Ezra, you remember that the temple had been rebuilt. But the walls surrounding the temple, they were still rubble. When Nehemiah heard this, he was brokenhearted. Nehemiah was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. He was seen as the most loyal advisor because of his job. When he approached the king, he desired to go rebuild this wall, and he was allowed to go do that. He prayed about it and headed that way. God put it on his heart to rebuild the wall. And as we think through this book of Nehemiah, there's so many things in our lives that we can think of that we're being called to rebuild. Maybe it's a relationship that has broken down, or maybe it's the rhythms of healthy lifestyles that you need to bring back to your life. He prayed and asked to go, and he scoped it out and made a plan. Now, if you are rebuilding something, you are going to need a plan. You're going to need to pray about it, and you're going to need to ask God for the wisdom that you need to build that plan. The next thing that he did was he built a team. In chapter 2, verses 17 and 18, we can read, "Then I said to them, 'You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace.' I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, 'Let us start rebuilding.' So they began the good work. He pulled this team in, he rallied them around him, and they began to get to work. Now, of course, if you have done something like this, if you've built a team, the first thing that you obviously know is going to happen is you're going to face obstacles. The rubble was so massive that it was hard for them to rebuild. It was literally in the way, almost like the clutter of life for us gets in the way sometimes. Social media, just general problems, stresses, things that we let come between us and God. The rubble and the complaining, it began to grow. They were tired and they were fearful of threats. In fact, in chapter 4, verse 10, it says, "Meanwhile, the people of Judah said, 'The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall.'" He faced opposition because of that, but he also faced opposition in the way of comments. You see, not everyone will be excited about what you're doing, no matter what you're rebuilding, whether it is for your life or your marriage or a relationship. And in the same way, Nehemiah faced opposition. There were 3 men that were persistently shooting criticisms and insults and threats. Now, some of them, if you dive into the book of Nehemiah, they're kind of silly. You wouldn't think that to be a threat. But Nehemiah pointed his team back to trusting God and focusing on the work. In chapter 4, verse 15, we read, "When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, for each to his own work." I love that verse because in that moment, he was able to pull his team around. He was able to rally his people around him and remind them that their focus really needed to be on God in that time. And they got back to work. This one is the hardest concept to wrap your mind around. As you are rebuilding something, as you are leaning into that relationship or trying to make church part of your daily rhythm or Bible reading, any of those things, as you're rebuilding something, having people that are coming against you is one of the hardest things to keep your eyes focused on God when that is happening. In Nehemiah 6:15, it says, "So the wall was completed in 52 days. When all our enemies heard about this, and all surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God." It's a really cool parallel when you think about the fact that he had opposition. He had naysayers. He had people that were exhausted. They were tired. And honestly, they succeeded. There's a beautiful gospel presentation in the middle of a CeCe Winans song that I absolutely love. She says, "This is why we do what we do, so that the Lord is glorified by our worship, and so people who don't know Jesus will want to know Jesus." Can you imagine being in this time and watching that wall be built? Nehemiah's success was a product of prayer, sacrifice, and perseverance, paired with his faith in God. As you rebuild, may you have the ability to clear away the clutter and distractions so that you and others around you can see God's work through you. I hope you have a wonderful day.